I thought getting fired would break me. I thought losing the job I had poured my heart into would destroy everything I had built. And for a while, it did. But sometimes, life isn't punishing you. It's pushing you. Pushing you out of places you've outgrown. Pushing you away from people who never really saw your worth. Pushing you toward a future bigger than anything you could imagine. My name is Emily. And this is the story of how getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. I wasn't just good at my job. I loved it. When I first walked through the glass doors of Solara Technologies, clutching my brand new briefcase and a heart full of hope, it felt like stepping into a dream. The office gleamed under soft golden lights. People moved briskly through the halls, important and focused. The smell of fresh coffee and new beginnings filled the air. It wasn't just a job. It was the start of a life I had always dreamed about. I was 24, fresh out of college and ready to conquer the world. And for a while, it seemed like the world was ready to let me. My manager, Linda, took me under her wing. At first, she seemed kind, supportive, the kind of leader you read about in career advice blogs. She gave me big projects, introduced me to the right people, praised me in meetings. "You have so much potential, Emily," she said once, patting my shoulder after a successful presentation. "You're going to go far here." I glowed under her approval. I worked late, stayed weekends, volunteered for every extra task. I memorized every client's name, every product spec, every minor protocol no one else bothered with. I became indispensable. Or at least, that's what I thought. The promotions didn't come right away, but I didn't mind. I told myself success was a marathon, not a sprint. I watched others get ahead, people who didn't work as hard, who didn't care as much, and swallowed the tiny seed of resentment growing in my chest. "You just have to be patient," Linda said once over lunch, swirling her wine. "Your time will come." So I waited. And worked. And waited. 3 years passed. 3 years of birthdays spent answering client emails. 3 years of missing family gatherings for last-minute product launches. 3 years of pouring every drop of myself into a company that I believed would one day reward me. There were signs. Of course. Signs that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Linda stopped inviting me to high-level meetings. New hires with half my experience were getting fast-tracked while I stayed in the same position. Bonuses that were promised got delayed due to budget cuts, even as senior executives showed off new luxury cars. But I didn't want to see it. I needed to believe that loyalty mattered, that hard work would be recognized. So I kept my head down. I kept working. I kept believing. Until the day it all came crashing down. It was a Friday. I remember because I had stayed up all night the previous evening preparing for a big client pitch. A pitch Linda had personally asked me to handle. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't slept. I had poured my soul into that presentation. And it went flawlessly. The client was thrilled. Signing a multi-million-dollar deal on the spot. Linda beamed at me, clapping my back a little too hard, whispering, "You just saved our quarter, Emily." I floated back to my desk. Exhausted but exhilarated. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was finally the moment I had been waiting for. An hour later, Linda called me into her office. She didn't look me in the eye as she closed the door behind us. "There's no easy way to say this," she said, smoothing down the front of her designer blazer. "Corporate restructuring. Budget realignment. Your position has been eliminated." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "Wait," I said, voice cracking. "You said the client. I just closed the biggest deal of the year." She winced, just slightly. "I know. And we're grateful. Truly. But these decisions come from higher up. It's out of my hands." I opened my mouth, then closed it again. What could I say? What could I possibly argue against a decision already made? In the end, all she offered me was 2 weeks severance and a hollow promise to write a glowing recommendation letter. An hour later, I was walking out of the building carrying a cardboard box filled with the pieces of my life. Photos, coffee mugs, certificates no one cared about anymore. The lobby security guard, the same one who used to nod at me every morning, avoided my eyes as I passed. Outside, the afternoon sun was blinding. Hot. Merciless. I stood there for a long time, clutching my box, feeling the heat bake into my skin, wondering how it was possible for the world to just keep turning after everything inside me had fallen apart. People bustled past, laughing into their phones, balancing Starbucks cups and briefcases, living lives untouched by my catastrophe. I felt invisible, unmoored, utterly, profoundly lost. And worst of all, I still wanted to go back inside. Still wanted to beg. Still wanted to believe there had been some mistake. Because if they didn't want me, if they could throw me away so easily, what did that say about me? For the first time in my adult life, I realized a terrible truth. I wasn't indispensable. I was replaceable, forgettable, disposable. The thought hollowed me out, scraping raw all the places where hope used to live. I had given them everything, and they had thrown me away like trash. I didn't know it then, standing there in the blinding sun, blinking back tears I refused to let fall. But getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to me. I just hadn't lived enough yet to see it. The first few weeks after losing my job felt like drifting through fog. I slept too much. Or sometimes, not at all. I binged terrible TV shows. Ate cereal straight from the box at 2 in the morning. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart lurched, hoping, irrationally, it was someone from Solara calling to say it had all been a mistake. But no calls came. Friends tried to reach out at first, inviting me to brunches, sending encouraging texts, offering half-hearted advice like, everything happens for a reason, and you're too talented to stay down for long. I appreciated it. But it didn't touch the hollow ache in my chest. The worst part wasn't the loss of the paycheck, though that was terrifying. The worst part was the loss of identity. For 3 years, I had been Emily from Solara. Emily the rising star. Emily who was going places. Without the title, without the work emails, without the endless meetings and deadlines and goals, who was I? I tried applying for jobs, but every rejection felt like confirmation that Solara had been right to get rid of me. I wasn't special. I wasn't irreplaceable. I was just another name in an endless stack of resumes. Panic set in. Money was draining from my savings account faster than I wanted to admit. Every time I bought groceries, every time I paid rent, every time another bill arrived in the mail, it felt like the walls closing in a little tighter. One night, about 6 weeks after the firing, I sat alone at my tiny kitchen table, staring at a pile of unopened rejection emails. I had applied to 57 jobs. 57. And not a single offer. The apartment was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional groan of old pipes in the walls. I buried my face in my hands and let the tears come. Not quiet, dignified tears. Ugly, gasping, snotty sobs that racked my whole body. I cried for the job I had lost, for the life I had imagined, for the version of myself that had believed that loyalty was enough to guarantee safety. When I finally ran out of tears, I sat there for a long time, staring into the darkness. And for the first time since that terrible Friday, a small, angry voice inside me stirred. Not the voice of grief. Not the voice of despair. A different voice. A defiant one. What if, it whispered, they hadn't fired you because you weren't good enough? What if they had fired you because you had outgrown them? The thought was absurd, arrogant, laughable, and yet it rooted itself in my mind. Unshakable. What if losing that job wasn't a punishment? What if it was permission? Permission to stop living small. Permission to stop waiting for scraps of approval. Permission to build something bigger than anything Solara could have ever offered me. The idea terrified me, but it also electrified me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than I had in months. I didn't know what the future looked like. I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't even know where to start. But for the first time in a long time, I felt something stir in my chest that wasn't fear. It was something stronger. Hope. And with it, a question. If I had nothing left to lose, what would I dare to dream? I didn't wake up one morning suddenly knowing what to do. There was no magical epiphany, no movie montage moment where everything clicked. It started with small steps. Messy, uncertain ones. I began by making a list. Not a list of jobs to apply for. A list of things I loved. Things that made me feel alive. Things that made the hours slip by unnoticed. It was harder than I expected. Because for so long, I had only thought of myself in terms of what companies wanted from me. What employers needed. What skills looked good on a resume. But deep down, beneath all the conditioning and fear, the answers were still there. I loved creating things. I loved helping people solve problems. I loved telling stories. It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. I started freelancing. Tiny projects at first, helping small businesses write website copy, managing social media accounts, creating simple marketing materials. The pay was terrible. The hours were unpredictable. The rejection emails kept coming. And some days I still curled up on the couch questioning every decision I made. But slowly, something began to shift. Every time a client smiled and said, "You made that so much clearer." Every time a project helped a small business land new customers. Every time someone trusted me with their story, and I helped them tell it better than they thought possible. I felt that old fire stir again. Not the desperate, hollow grind I had felt at Solara. Something deeper. Something more real. One afternoon, as I finished a project for a local nonprofit, I realized something shocking. I was happy. Not wildly, uncontrollably happy, but quietly, steadily happy. The kind of happiness that doesn't shout. The kind that hums underneath your skin. Steady and sure. It wasn't about the money, though that slowly started to improve, too. It was about the ownership. The autonomy. The sense that, for the first time, I was building something that belonged to me. Not to a boss who could erase me with a memo. Not to a company that saw me as a line item. To me. By the end of that first year, I had built a client base steady enough to pay my bills without dipping into savings. I had developed skills I never thought I'd have: negotiation, marketing, business management. Skills Solara had never bothered to teach me because they never intended to let me rise high enough to need them. I rented a tiny co-working space, just a desk and a chair by a window that overlooked the chaotic hum of the city. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't flashy. But it was mine. And sitting there one morning, sipping bad coffee from a chipped mug, watching sunlight catch on the metal frames of office buildings, I realized something that made me laugh out loud. Getting fired didn't destroy me. It freed me. It burned down a life that was too small for me to realize it was a cage. And from the ashes, something stronger had started to grow. Not a career. A calling. A life. And it was just getting started. Success didn't arrive overnight. It came in tiny, stubborn victories that piled up like stones at my feet. One freelance project turned into two. Two turned into four. Four turned into a steady hum of referrals, friends telling friends, businesses passing along my name. Every time I thought I might stumble, some new opportunity rose up to meet me. It wasn't glamorous work at first. I wrote blog posts for landscaping companies. I designed social media calendars for tiny bakeries struggling to stay afloat. I helped a retired veteran launch a nonprofit teaching kids how to code. And every single project mattered. Every single project taught me something I hadn't known I needed to learn. Patience. Negotiation. Boundaries. How to stand up for the value of my work without apology. How to say no to clients who wanted champagne service on a tap water budget. How to believe, deep in my bones, that my work had worth, even if no boss stamped it approved at the end of the day. 16 months after that terrible Friday at Solara, I landed my first major contract. A mid-sized tech firm bigger than any client I had worked with so far reached out after seeing a campaign I had designed for a local bookstore. They wanted me to lead a full-scale brand refresh, logo redesign, website overhaul, new marketing materials from top to bottom. The kind of project that, if I had still been at Solara, I would have killed for the chance to even sit in on. I spent 3 sleepless nights working on the proposal, not because I doubted myself, but because for the first time in a long time I truly cared. Not about impressing someone else, about doing justice to myself. When I clicked send on the final proposal, I felt something rare and beautiful. Pride. Not the fleeting high of someone else's approval, the deep, steady pride of showing up for myself. They accepted my proposal 2 days later, without haggling, without questioning my worth. And when the first deposit hit my account, more money than I had ever seen from a single client, I sat at my little desk by the window and cried. But this time, they were tears of triumph. Not because the money solved everything. Not because success tasted as sweet as I had imagined. Because in that moment, I realized I hadn't just survived getting fired. I had transformed because of it. I wasn't the same girl who had stood blinking in the sunlight outside Solara's doors, clutching a cardboard box and wondering if she would ever matter again. I was someone new, someone forged in fire and failure and fear, and still standing, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. The climb wasn't over. I still had bills to pay, clients to manage, dreams to chase. But for the first time, the summit didn't feel impossible. It felt inevitable. Success changes you. Not in the way people think, not in the way flashy articles or self-help books promise. It changes you quietly, internally. You stop asking for permission. You stop apologizing for taking up space. You stop explaining why you deserve to be here. You just are. That realization didn't hit me all at once. It built slowly, moment by moment. Each client I helped, each challenge I conquered, each night I stayed up late building a life that no one could take from me. By my 3rd year of freelancing, my reputation had grown beyond anything I had imagined. I wasn't just another writer or consultant anymore. I was a name people whispered in meetings, a must-call when companies wanted things done right. One day, an invitation landed in my inbox. A major tech conference in the city was looking for panel speakers, entrepreneurs who had built their businesses from scratch. My first instinct was to delete it. Surely they had sent it by mistake. But they hadn't. They wanted me. Me, the girl who once thought her whole life ended in a cardboard box. Standing on that stage, facing a sea of faces, I realized something incredible. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I belonged here. After the panel, there was a networking event. I mingled, exchanged cards, answered questions about branding strategies and storytelling techniques. And then, across the crowded room, I saw a face I hadn't seen in years. Linda, still polished, still smiling that corporate, glossy smile. But there were cracks in the polish now. A tension in the way she held herself. A strain in her laugh that hadn't been there before. She recognized me instantly. Her eyes widened just slightly before she composed herself. "Emily," she said, approaching with a champagne flute in hand. "It's been ages. You look fantastic." I smiled. Calm. Controlled. "Thank you," I said. "It's been an interesting few years." We made small talk, meaningless, brittle words, until finally she said, "I hear you're doing very well for yourself." It wasn't a compliment. It was an accusation wrapped in silk. I shrugged, pretending not to notice. "Things have been good," I said simply. She hesitated. Then, almost casually, "If you're ever thinking about coming back to the corporate world, there might be some opportunities opening up. We're always looking for fresh talent." I laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just softly, genuinely, because standing there, staring into the eyes of the woman who once thought she could discard me without consequence. I realized I didn't hate her. I didn't need revenge. I had already won. Not because I was richer. Not because I was standing taller. Not even because the tables had turned. I had won because I was free. Free from needing her approval. Free from chasing validation in places that would never offer it. I smiled one last time and said, "Thank you, Linda. But I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." And I walked away. Not triumphant. Not bitter. Just whole. And in that moment, I knew. Getting fired hadn't just set me free. It had given me back to myself. And there is no greater victory than that. In the years that followed, I built a life beyond anything I had once believed possible. A life not measured by job titles. Not limited by office politics. Not defined by someone else's idea of success. I worked with brands I admired. I mentored young entrepreneurs just starting out. I gave talks, not about how to get rich fast, but about resilience. About rising after the fall. About trusting yourself when the world tells you not to. I traveled. I saw places I had only dreamed about when I was chained to a desk, wondering if I was allowed to take a full weekend off. I spent afternoons in sunlit cafes, scribbling ideas in notebooks for the sheer joy of it. I spent mornings hiking trails instead of sitting in traffic jams. I spent nights laughing with friends who knew me for who I was, not what I could do for them. I wasn't rich, not in the way those glossy magazine profiles of success try to sell you. But I was wealthy in all the ways that mattered. Freedom. Integrity. Joy. One crisp autumn evening, as I stood on the balcony of my small but cozy apartment, a cup of tea warming my hands, I looked out at the city's skyline glittering against the darkening sky and thought, if they hadn't fired me, I might have stayed. Stayed small. Stayed scared. Stayed waiting for someone else to tell me I was enough. Getting fired wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It burned down a life built on fear and loyalty to the wrong people. And in the ashes, I built something better. Something stronger. Something mine. And you know what? I'm grateful. Grateful for the doors that slammed in my face. Grateful for the people who underestimated me. Grateful for the day they handed me a cardboard box and thought they were ending my story. Because they weren't ending it. They were setting it free. And if you're standing where I once stood, hurt, lost, humiliated, I want you to hear me. This isn't your ending. It's your beginning. You're not broken. You're becoming. And the life waiting for you on the other side? It's bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than you can even imagine right now. Hold on. Keep walking. Trust the fire inside you. It knows the way. Maybe you're sitting there right now, feeling like everything you built has been torn away. Maybe you're holding a box of your dreams, standing outside doors that slammed shut behind you. Maybe you're wondering if you'll ever find your way again. I know how that feels. I know the hollow ache, the fear, the anger. But hear me. You are not what they took from you. You are what you choose to build next. Being fired didn't ruin me. It revealed me. It stripped away the noise, the false promises, the ceilings built to keep me small. And underneath it all, I found something stronger than fear, stronger than anger, stronger than failure. I found me, and so will you. The world doesn't get to decide when your story ends. You do. So pick up the pieces, light the match, and build something so breathtaking they'll have no choice but to remember the day they lost you. My name is Emily, and this is not the end of your story. It's just the beginning.